So I just take this analogy from, I show this slide sometimes when I talk about asthma. So if you think of the kind of asthma, allergic sensitization, and the pathogenesis, you think you might have some allergen exposure, which you bring into your body. There's specific IgE, this is attached to these mast cells, which become sensitized, and these things produce these inflammatory mediators, and these inflammatory mediators create kind of classical symptoms, bronchoconstriction, mucus generation, things like that. And the way that we can attack this, primarily, is through medication. So you have like your inhaled corticosteroids over here, you've got your kind of leukotriene type modifiers over here, you got your anti-IgE type stuff over here, and so that all does varying kind of jobs of affecting people's asthma. But then there's also this part over here. So one of the reasons I'm excited about a lot of the environmental intervention stuff that we're doing is that it kind of affects the most upstream part of the disease process. And not only does it affect this most upstream part, but it's actually very inexpensive relative to all this medication. So it's efficient and it's potentially powerful, and so that's kind of nice. So if you were to translate this over to kind of the way that research is disseminated, so there's people conducting research over here. It may be problematic, it may be incorrect in terms of the analysis. You submit a paper to some journal that goes through and then the paper is published. And then after the paper is published, you get the data, you get the code, and you can see what they did. So the typical kind of safeguards are, so you submit the paper to the journal, maybe the editor thinks it stinks, so he rejects it. Or they send it up, then there's peer review. So the peer review is supposed to just be a check on something. And if it gets past peer review, it gets published. So that's where reproducible research comes in at the most downstream aspect of the process. And so there's a lot of discussion now about doing this. And so the idea is that, okay, well, why wait for all the data and the code to be available after the thing is published? Why not do it as part of the publication process? And I think that's a noble goal, but I think totally unrealistic. Because I don't think it's realistic to expect peer reviewers to kind of reproduce everything. I speak from experience. So those of you who are not in statistics, are not used to waiting the typical 6 to 12 months for your review to come in. And if you add on top of that the need to reproduce the entire analysis, will be promoted 40 years from now. So that's reasonable, and I'll give an example of that. But I think the question is there something that we can do in the most upstream part of this process? And so that's what I want to talk about today. So this is one example of moving the reproducible part to the peer review aspect, or not exactly to the peer review, but somewhere upstream a little bit. This is just that we have a policy at the Journal of Biostatistics, which is easily the best statistics journal in the world. And I'm the associate editor for what's called the associate editor for reproducibility. And we have a very light policy, which is totally voluntary, where you can submit your data and your code to the editor, the associate editor for reproducibility, and me, will reproduce it. And it's not a 100% bulletproof policy, but it's never happened that I haven't been able to reproduce anything. But if it is reproducible, you get this nice little R stamped on the top of your paper. Then there's two other options: there's a D and a C. If you submit your code, then you get a little C over there. I don't check that, I just assume that is fine. If you submit your data, you get a D. If you submit your data and your code, you get a D and a C. And if I reproduce it, you get an R. So, and then this is Jeff's only contribution to this work. This is one of his papers. He got an R, and it took me a week to reproduce it, but it was fine. So anyway, so that's one model. This is not really kind of a deterrent, so to speak, because it's totally voluntary. It happens after the paper is accepted from peer review. Anyway, so this is one model.